Before we start this section on problem solving, take a second and copy down this table of keywords. You may have had a table like this in the past, but go ahead and copy this one. It's probably more complete than the one you've had in the past. Now take a second to write down and read this word problem and pause the video. When you're ready, hit play and we'll tackle the problem together. So the first thing we'd like to do in these type of problems is to assign a variable, and I'm going to go ahead and let A be the amount of the award here. So once I have that variable, I can represent what's happened with that award, and I can eventually solve for that award. So if an attorney and her client split the jury's cash evenly, split evenly is a keyword for division if you look back at your table. It's very similar to shared equally among. So this cash award was split evenly amongst two people. It was divided by 2. Then she paid her assistant $1,000. So that's a subtraction. Whenever you pay somebody out, that's a subtraction of $1,000. The lawyer ended up making, and ended up is one of those keywords for equal. The lawyer ended up making $10,000. So this is our equation here. And we're just looking for the amount of the award. So you can go ahead and solve this equation for A if you like. I'll let you do that on your own. But we get that the amount of the award here comes out to be $22,000. But what we are getting at here is we are getting at how to set up the equation, which is the important part. We need to set up that equation there. Now take a minute to read this problem and then pause the video when you're ready to start. And once again, we need to look for a variable. And here it might be helpful to look for an independent variable. So my independent variable, if you'll recall, is the variable that I know nothing about. So they're telling me about the width and the length, but they're telling me that the length is 3 times the width. I have some information about the length, but I have no information about the width. So the width is going to be my independent variable. I have no information about it. Everything else in this problem is going to use width, W. And whenever you have a geometry problem, it's helpful to draw out the shape. So here's my rectangle. Remember that our independent variable is W, width. And instead of labeling the top and the bottom with L, I'm going to use my independent variable. They tell me that the length is 3 times the width. So instead of an L, I'm going to use a 3W, 3 times the width. That represents the length. So my length here is going to be 3 times the width on the top and bottom of this rectangle. So I have my rectangle. I also know that there are 400 feet of chain link fencing. If you think back to what fencing means, fencing is a perimeter problem. Perimeters are things that go around the rim of the shape. So the perimeter of this rectangle is given to us by the sum of the lengths and the widths. The perimeter is 400 feet. We know that instead of length, we're going to use 3 times W. Bring down your next W. So there are 3 plus W's and 2 W's. I just rewrote it a little bit nicer here. I rewrote the 3W in blue to represent that that's the length. But if we're solving this equation, we can just combine all the like terms together. All these guys are like terms over here. So I have a total of 8 W's, 3W plus W plus 3W plus W comes out to be 8W. To finish solving this equation, we do the inverse of the multiplication by 8, which is division by 8. The 8's divide out to 1, and we get that 400 divided by 8 is 50. Now 50 feet represents the width. To find the length, you have to remember that the length was represented by the expression 3 times W. So the length is going to be 3 times the amount of the width. The amount of the width was 50. The length comes out to be then 150 feet. You can verify this. You should try verifying this and ask in class if you don't know how. This is our next word problem. Take a minute to pause the video and read. Hit play when you're ready to begin. So again, always be on the lookout for those keywords. The keywords here are split the refunded money equally. So let's let R represent the refunded money. We're writing an equation for how much the refund was. Well, we first have to understand that the refunded money gets split equally amongst 2 people. That means that it was divided by 2. The husband then gave 50 of his money to charity. So when you give $50 away from what you have, that's a subtraction. he was left with, and that's a keyword for equal sign, $70. So that's the equation. I'll let you solve that on your own. Just for your own information, when you're finished, you should have gotten that the refund was $240. Solve that equation to make sure you can get that refund. Ask in class if you have trouble. Take a second to read this next problem. Hit play when you're ready. So these problems often have, these problems are a lot of times simpler than the ones we've been doing, just because there is no real world scenario here. It's direct translation from that table that was given to you in the beginning of this video. So go back to that table and look for these keywords. We have the 10 less than 5 times the number, so times the number, is the same as the number increased by 6. There's a lot of keywords here. The word less than has to do with a subtraction. The word times the number has to do with a multiplication. The word same as has to do with equal sign. And the word increase by has to do with addition. So we have the 10 less than 5 times the number. So 5 times the number has to go first, 5x. Subtracted by 10. It's 10 less than the 5x, so I must understand 5x first. Is the same as, that's your equal sign, the number x increased by 6. That's your equation right there. When I solved this equation, I got that x equals 4, but I'll let you solve that on your own. If you have questions about how to do that, ask in class. Here's another problem having to do with perimeter and molding and that sort of thing, so take a minute to read it. Hit play when you're ready. Once again, you need to assign an independent variable. So we know that the width of the room, we want to find the width of the room if the length is twice the width. So once again, your length is given to you using W. Your length is twice your width. So your width is going to be your independent variable. It is the variable that we have no information about. When you set up your rectangle, your width, your independent variable, is by itself, and the length is going to be represented as 2 times the width. So let's set up our equation to bring this all together. Just read through the rectangle here to make it a little bit easier to see. We know that the perimeter of any shape is given to us by taking the lengths and adding them together, and by taking the widths and adding them together, or just going around the shape. So what you really have is you have length plus width plus length plus width. So when we plug in our lengths and our widths, we know that the lengths are 2 W's, the widths are just W, and the perimeter in this scenario is 240. So we just need to solve this equation here. When it all comes down to it, these guys are all like terms. I'm sorry, the perimeter here was 60, not 240. I was reading ahead. The perimeter is 60. So when it all comes down to it, all these are like terms. So we have 2W plus W plus 2W plus W. That's a total of 6W. Finish solving for W by dividing 6 from both sides, and we get that the width is 10 feet. So that's the width. If we want to find the length, well, we know that the length was 2 times as big as the width. So the length is twice that, which is going to be 20 feet.